Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Remember to hit that subscribe button because we are going to talk about something that I don't normally talk about on this channel, and that is a Marvel movie. And the specific movie I'll be talking about is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So let's get into it. So, for context, I'm not really a huge fan of Guardians of the Galaxy. I love some of the characters, like Rocket Raccoon in particular is one of my favorites in the entire MCU. But in terms of the movies themselves, I thought they were okay and mostly just average. They were fine, and after that, they really left no real impression on me. I also think Marvel has been on a real cold streak as of late. I think the last Ant-Man movie is a joke of a film. And one of my worst takes on this channel, I came out of Thor Love and Thunder and said that it was absolutely incredible. I don't know why I said that in hindsight now, because I really don't like it as much as I did back then. And I'm kind of embarrassed with that take now. But I do like some of those elements still, but yeah, it's still fairly weak. So naturally, this had a lot going against it in terms of my expectations. I was excited for this, however, more than most Marvel movies because it looked like it was going to go into Rocket's backstory, which I know is one of the more tragic tales in the history of Marvel's stories. And I was surprised that they never actually dived into it a little bit before now. Well, I have now seen this movie, and I have to say, from the minute that this film starts, James Gunn gives us one of the best MCU films I have ever seen. It belongs with Black Panther, Avengers Endgame, and the first Iron Man. And I know that this isn't some Thor Love and Thunder hot take that I'm bringing right now. This film has a lot of weight to it and a lot of tonal balance that really worked so well, maybe better than most MCU films. And I think that was truly an incredible feat. I mean, firstly, you just have to give credit to the fact that this doesn't feel like a cinematic episode in a television show like many other entries in the MCU. This is a film that actually is a third in a trilogy. It focuses on these characters and gives no hints to the future of the MCU. No teasers, none of that bullshit. A problem with a lot of MCU movies is that sometimes I feel like a lot of people, including myself at times, go into it just looking out for the next teaser for what's coming next. That's what Ant-Man felt like in a lot of those scenes, and I'm glad that Guardians 3 just does not do that at all. It seems like James Gunn was given a little more creative freedom to really dive into the darker elements of this group of characters. They are all flawed and have gone through some sort of trauma, and they actually explore that in very interesting ways. The two best characters I think in this film were Chris Pratt's Star-Lord and Bradley Cooper's Rocket. Every scene they are in, especially the ones with Rocket, are some of the best things that I have seen in any superhero movie. Just because something has the Marvel logo appear before the beginning of the film, it does not mean that every single film is some joke fest. This thing wants to take itself a lot more seriously, and this really does that extremely well, and I cannot express that enough. Each and every character has a real satisfying conclusion that feels definitive, and I would honestly be perfectly happy if they never put these characters in an MCU film ever again. I'm actually pleading to Marvel right now, don't do it. It will remove all of the excellent arcs these characters go on. Your Avengers movie will still make an ungodly amount of money if they aren't in it. Let's dive into this a little bit more because these arcs are the thing that really make this film special. I won't go into detail because of course that's going to start spoiling this film, but everything with Rocket is sincerely the best part of this movie, and I'm not saying that just because I like the character. I don't tear up often when I watch films, and I never really do it in a superhero film, ever. But man, this one actually got me a few times because it has a lot of weight to it, and there is no typical Marvel trope of undercutting a lot of these dramatic elements with a joke every single chance it gets. No, James Gunn does justice to real dramatic elements that were actually quite powerful and make this character in this group so much more layered. It makes their actions and their demeanors very justified in a way, and Rocket's arc just really illustrated that supremely well. You know from the trailer that the Otter is in this with Rocket, And if you know his backstory, you really know what that means. To me, this is the definitive version of that tale, and James Gunn really gives it the weight it deserves. Each new character in that group was nice and a very welcome addition. In terms of some of the characters I haven't mentioned much, like Drax and Mantis, they do have some really great moments. Drax has a nice little arc, and the back and forth he has with Mantis is always quite funny and charming. Nebula is also really good in this, but I think it would have been nice to go a little bit more into the relationship she has with Gamora a little bit more. But in the context of the entire film, I'm not too mad that they didn't really acknowledge that too much, because the film covers a lot in its long runtime, and it manages to do it quite effectively. I think Gamora has some really interesting moments with Peter Quill, and I like where they both end up by the end of the film, and that's all I'll say there. Groot, as always, is kind of just doing his thing. He has a couple of funny moments, but he usually isn't the first thing that I, or probably a lot of people, talk about when they watch a Guardians movie. He is a nice little element, and that's really it. Another thing I think a lot of people are quite interested in is Adam Warlock. From my understanding, and I'm not a big reader of Marvel comics, but I know that he's a pretty seminal part of the Marvel universe. I have to say this where I start talking about the flaws of the film, unfortunately, because I think a lot of people are going to be a little bit disappointed in Will Poulter's performance as Adam Warlock and this portrayal on screen. I really like the performance myself. It's quite entertaining and funny, but I think for people who take the character really seriously, you're going to be a bit let down by this portrayal. It almost made me feel like that James Gunn wasn't really interested in having Adam Warlock in this movie, but he had to because they teased it at the end of the second one. James Gunn wrote one of the better screenplays in the MCU, and Marvel could have potentially come in and gone, look, you need to find a spot to put him in this film. I'm not saying that's what happened at all. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what happened there. But his appearance just didn't feel that important in the grand scheme of things. The real antagonist here is played by Chikwudi Iwuji, and he is pretty good in this. He is maybe one of the better villains in an MCU film. His actions are vile, and you really want to see him be defeated pretty bad by the end of the movie. The villain isn't someone who is top tier in the terms of the greatest villains ever by any means, but he served the movie really nicely, and his motivations were quite interesting too. Now, going into the more technical elements, this is pretty solid. I think the action in particular is shot really well. It is a little bit more brutal in some instances, which I really liked, because Marvel is known to pretty much shy away from that because we must protect the children at all times. James Gunn doesn't really use cutty bullshit either during these sequences. There's one particular long take which I thought was incredibly well done. It was very stylish, and I liked its placement in the movie. The soundtrack is maybe my favorite in any Guardians movie. It knew the right places to play the songs, and the songs were songs that I usually enjoy listening to in general. The visual effects, however, is something I do want to talk about because it's become a little bit of a laughing stock in terms of the more recent MCU movies. Ant-Man in particular was a complete joke. I would say this does a much better job than Ant-Man or Thor Love and Thunder, but there were definitely times when it was messy. When we were entering the third act, this was a really big thing. It disengaged me quite a bit, but luckily the film did manage to capture my attention again as the third act fully kicked in. But yeah, I'm sure someone will take a picture of a really bad shot somewhere in this film and say that the whole movie had the worst visual effects ever seen, even though that's quite not the case. It is solid. I think it does get used a little bit too much, and I know that sounds a bit weird in a Guardians film, but at some points, yeah, it does feel like a bit of a cartoon, and it just doesn't look clean like Dune or Avatar or something like that. I also think when you get to that point in the movie, just before the third act kicks in, we really start to see some Marvel-esque tropes appear, which I'm not a fan of for about 10 or so minutes, and James Gunn manages to steer the ship in the right direction. The character moments in this far exceed any action that this film presents, because when it does present most of the action, it does feel like any other superhero movie that you've ever seen before. As I said, there are some really good sequences, which I already mentioned before, with that amazing long take and some more brutal moments that were effective. I mean, overall, despite watching this one with maybe one of the worst audiences that I've ever been with in a while, literally the row in front of me was like a group of 13-year-olds standing up constantly, talking loudly and on their phones, some with max brightness up, and that just would not stop during the entire movie. Despite that, I really, really enjoyed this movie. I mentioned the audience story because that should tell you right there that despite all of that, this MCU movie managed to leave a really good impression on me. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is maybe my third favorite MCU film behind Iron Man 1 and Black Panther, and who knows, it may surpass it one day, depending on how it ages in my mind. I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 5. You have no idea how close I was to giving this a 5, but I only just came around on giving a true sci-fi masterpiece like Dune a 5. So in that context, in this genre, no Guardians of the Galaxy film is really on that level, but this is truly a fantastic film that is well worth your time. I completely forgot to talk about the post-credit scenes. They are fine and are worthy to stick around a couple minutes for, but don't expect a teaser for the next big Marvel movie because you will be disappointed. This is a Guardians movie through and through, which is one of the best parts about it, and why this is officially my film of the year so far. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Tell me in the comments below what your favorite MCU film is, and if you enjoyed Guardians 3. I hear some critics actually calling this film a cash grab. I don't think we saw the same movie because this is maybe the furthest thing away from that. Unlike most Marvel films, this actually takes a couple of risks, and I think it really paid off. And because of that, we got a Marvel movie that I might actually rewatch in the future and will remember forever. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.